Jessica and her 8-year-old son, Liam, never imagined that an ordinary rainy evening at home would turn into a nightmare. Sirens shattered the quiet neighborhood, flashing lights painting the walls of their living room as police surrounded their house. What started as a routine check quickly spiraled into a standoff that would test every limit of fear, courage, and the bond between mother and child. It was an ordinary evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other's names and children's laughter drifted through the air like music. Streetlights flickered on one by one as the sun disappeared behind clouds, casting a soft, golden glow over the tidy lawns and neatly painted houses. Cars were parked along the curbs, and the faint hum of televisions and radios spilled from living rooms. People were finishing dinner, walking dogs, or watering flowers, completely unaware that something unusual was about to disrupt their sense of calm. At the end of Maplewood Drive, a modest house sat quietly, its curtains drawn but not completely concealing life inside. The mother, a woman in her early 30s with worn eyes and restless energy, moved around the kitchen. Her 8-year-old son, unaware of the storm approaching, sat at the table coloring a picture, completely absorbed in his own world. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft at first, then steadily increasing, creating a rhythmic patter on the roof. The quiet was deceptive. It was in this deceptively calm environment that the tension began to build, unnoticed by the neighbors who went about their routines. Suddenly, the calm was broken by the flashing of blue and red lights reflected on the rain-soaked pavement. Police cars pulled up abruptly, tires screeching slightly as they came to a stop in front of the house. The sound of sirens, though not deafening, carried an urgent message across the neighborhood. Doors opened, officers stepped out, and their presence was enough to draw the attention of everyone nearby. Windows in neighboring houses opened slowly, and curious eyes peered out, trying to understand what had triggered the sudden escalation. The mother, sensing the arrival of authority, became tense. She moved quickly, shutting the back door and checking the locks, her mind racing through possible scenarios. Her son, sensing the sudden shift in mood, looked up from his coloring. He saw the red and blue reflections bouncing across the living room walls and felt a strange mixture of curiosity and fear. He had never seen his mother act so abruptly, so hurried, so consumed by a sense of urgency he could not explain. The police approached cautiously, radios crackling as officers communicated with one another. They weren't sure what they were walking into, only that there had been a call about a disturbance, something that warranted immediate attention. Neighbors whispered to each other, some stepping closer to get a better look, others retreating behind drawn curtains. The rain fell harder now, bouncing off windshields and soaking the pavement, adding a sense of urgency and drama to the unfolding scene. Inside, the mother's heartbeat quickened. She knew that once the police were inside, there would be little she could do to control the situation. Her movements became more deliberate, almost protective, as she glanced at her son, making sure he was away from the front of the house. The boy watched, wide-eyed, as the scene outside seemed to grow larger than life through the window. He didn't understand the gravity of the moment, but he could feel the tension, the almost tangible weight of fear pressing down on the room. Minutes felt like hours. The neighborhood, normally serene, was now alive with anticipation, as though everyone collectively held their breath. The flashing lights reflected on puddles in the street, creating a surreal dance of color and shadow. Police officers positioned themselves strategically while the mother's mind raced, each thought faster than the next. The son clutched his coloring pencils, the picture in front of him forgotten, his attention fixed on the movements outside and the anxious energy of his mother. This was the night that would change everything for them, though no one watching from outside could have predicted the depth of what was about to unfold. The quiet neighborhood, once so ordinary, had become the stage for a story no one could have imagined, a story that would linger in the memories of everyone involved long after the rain stopped and the lights faded. The tension inside the house thickened with every passing second. The mother moved from room to room, her movements quick and deliberate, as if each step could buy her a few more moments of control. She kept glancing toward the living room window, where the boy pressed his small hands against the glass, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Outside, the rain fell steadily, streaking down the window pane and blurring the view of flashing lights. The sound of police radios crackling through the night air grew louder, punctuated by the occasional shouted instruction, each one increasing the unease that seemed to seep into every corner of the home. The boy clutched a small stuffed animal, his only source of comfort, as he watched the officers position themselves, their movements precise and methodical, waiting for the right moment to act. The mother's mind raced, her thoughts spinning faster than the raindrops on the window as she tried to anticipate their next move. She knew that one wrong step could escalate the situation beyond repair. Her body tensed, shoulders tight, heart pounding against her chest like a warning drum. Every sound outside, the rustle of a uniform, the creak of a car door, the distant murmur of neighbors gathering in whispers felt amplified. The boy, sensing her tension, mirrored it, his small body stiffening, eyes darting back and forth between his mother and the flashes of red and blue light outside. In that moment, the house no longer felt like a home. It was a battlefield, with the mother caught between the instinct to protect her son and the mounting pressure of law enforcement surrounding them. The air smelled faintly of rain and fear, mixing in a way that made the room feel almost unreal, as though time had slowed down and every heartbeat mattered. Officers spoke in low, steady tones, trying to maintain calm, but their presence alone added weight to the atmosphere. They could see through the windows the mother's attempts to keep her son safe while resisting entry. It was a delicate balance, a silent negotiation where words were secondary to movement, to the subtle ways tension could be read and reacted to. The mother's defiance was evident not only in her actions but in the way she held herself, upright and rigid, refusing to show weakness. She was determined not to let the officers inside, not to surrender control of her home, even as every passing minute intensified the standoff. The boy, watching from the safety of the living room, could feel the energy around him, the unspoken conflict between his mother and the world outside, and it left a mark he could not fully understand. Time stretched thin. Moments that should have passed in seconds seemed endless, punctuated by bursts of activity outside, the shuffle of feet, the murmur of officers, and the distant voices of neighbors speculating. The mother moved with purpose, checking locks, closing blinds, pacing the hallways, her mind racing for solutions that seemed increasingly impossible. She glanced back at her son repeatedly, needing to reassure herself as much as him, even though she couldn't articulate the fear or the stakes. The boy clutched his stuffed animal tighter, feeling both the safety and tension of being so close to his mother, yet exposed to the chaos unfolding around them. Every second felt heavier, charged with uncertainty and the unspoken question of what might happen next. The quiet neighborhood, once a place of comfort and routine, had transformed into a stage for a tense and unpredictable struggle, a night that would linger in memory for all who witnessed it, and for the boy a night that would shape the way he saw the world for years to come. As the night wore on, the initial tension gave way to a more unsettling unease. The police, initially focused on gaining entry, began to notice subtle details inside the house that suggested the situation was far more complicated than a simple standoff. From the outside, the house seemed ordinary, but the inside told a different story. Papers were scattered across the kitchen counter, photographs pinned to walls, and notes tucked into drawers. Each item hinted at a life filled with hidden struggles, long-standing fears, and unresolved conflicts. The mother moved among these objects with a careful awareness, as though she was guarding more than just her home. She had spent years concealing parts of her life that no one in the neighborhood knew existed, and now those secrets were slowly being uncovered under the harsh glow of flashlight beams and the steady pressure of police attention. Investigators began piecing together fragments of her story, each discovery adding complexity to an already tense situation. Letters revealed disputes with former friends and acquaintances, warnings of threats she had received, and pleas for help that had seemingly gone unanswered. Photographs showed events from years past, moments that painted a picture of a life under constant scrutiny and stress. It became clear that the mother's defiance was not born solely out of stubbornness or anger. It was rooted in a deep, lingering fear that someone wanted to harm her and, by extension, her son. Officers realized that their presence alone might have triggered the intensity of her reaction. The house, once a symbol of normalcy and safety, had become a repository of fears, frustrations, and hidden truths. The boy watched from the corner of the living room, trying to process the fragments of the world around him. He noticed the careful way his mother handled each object, the way she paused to look at certain papers as though they held warnings he could not yet understand. Though he was too young to fully comprehend the circumstances, he sensed the gravity of the situation and the weight of his mother's determination. Every glance toward the window reminded him that the officers outside were waiting, watching, analyzing. The tension between what was inside and what was outside created a pressure that seemed almost tangible, pressing down on the small house in waves. He hugged his stuffed animal tightly, grounding himself in something familiar while the adult world unfolded around him in ways that were frightening and confusing. As the investigation deepened, more evidence came to light suggesting that the mother had been carefully protecting secrets that could endanger her family if revealed. There were warnings from neighbors who had noticed unusual activity months before and small incidents that, in hindsight, indicated a long-standing struggle. The realization that she had been living under such pressure for so long added a layer of understanding to her extreme behavior. The police had initially approached the situation with a focus on enforcing rules, but now they began to see the human element beneath the surface. The mother's actions, while extreme, were a response to a complex web of fear, mistrust, and unresolved threats. The night stretched further, shadows lengthening across walls as rain continued to patter on the roof. Every detail, from the placement of papers to the careful avoidance of certain corners, told a story of a life shaped by caution and hidden dangers. The mother's defiance was no longer just a standoff, it was a revelation of years of secrecy, protection, and survival. For the boy, every moment added to a growing understanding that the world was larger, more complicated, and more frightening than he had ever imagined. The ordinary house with its familiar rooms and everyday objects had transformed into a stage where hidden truths emerged, shaping the night into a story that would linger long after the rain stopped and the flashing lights faded from sight. Just when it seemed the tension might finally reach a breaking point, an unexpected discovery shifted everything. The mother, moving cautiously through the living room, noticed a small envelope tucked behind a stack of books. It had been hidden in plain sight, almost as if it had been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. She hesitated, the weight of the night pressing down on her, but she knew she had no choice. Inside was a note written in hurried, almost frantic handwriting, the words jagged and urgent. The message spoke of a person who had been watching them for years, manipulating events and creating an invisible threat that had shaped the mother's every decision. It explained, in part, why she had reacted so strongly to the police presence. The note revealed that her defiance wasn't just about protecting her son from law enforcement, it was about shielding him from someone far more dangerous, someone who had infiltrated their lives silently and skillfully. The revelation changed the dynamic in the house. The mother's eyes widened as she reread the note, each word confirming suspicions she had long tried to dismiss. Fear and clarity mingled together, sharpening her resolve. Outside, the police were unaware of the hidden layer of danger, still focused on standard procedures and maintaining control. Inside, the mother's understanding of the threat deepened, and with it came a sense of urgency. She moved deliberately now, organizing papers, securing personal items, and ensuring her son remained close. The boy watched quietly, noticing the sudden shift in his mother's demeanor. There was a sharpness to her movements, a focus that was different from the anxious pacing of earlier hours. Though he couldn't fully grasp the meaning of the note, he sensed that something important had been uncovered, something that explained the heightened tension and the extreme actions of the night. The police began discussing strategies in hushed tones, unaware of the new element that had just been discovered. Their careful planning, the positioning outside the house, and the measured patience all continued according to procedure, but the unseen threat inside had the potential to unravel everything. The mother, holding the note close to her chest, felt both fear and empowerment. She understood that the night was no longer just a confrontation, it was a revelation. For years, someone had been manipulating events, using subtle threats and hidden messages to control her actions and instill fear. The envelope, the handwriting, and the clarity of its contents became a turning point, illuminating the invisible forces that had shaped her behavior long before the police had arrived. The boy, still clutching his stuffed animal, sensed a shift in the air. The way his mother moved, the way she spoke softly to herself, and the intensity in her gaze made him realize that the night held more secrets than he had imagined. The ordinary walls of their home now seemed charged with hidden meaning, and every shadow seemed to hint at the presence of an unseen observer. The note explained what he could not yet articulate, that danger sometimes comes not from those who are obvious, but from the quiet, hidden forces that manipulate events from behind the scenes. Hours passed as the mother and son absorbed the implications of the discovery. Outside, rain continued to fall, drumming against the roof and windows, a steady reminder of the world beyond their home. The revelation in the note transformed the night from a simple standoff into a complex puzzle of fear, protection, and unseen threats. The mother's defiance, once perceived as irrational, now made sense in the context of the larger danger. For the boy, the hidden note became a symbol of the unseen complexities of life, an early lesson that the truth often lies beneath the surface and that protection sometimes requires choices that are hard to understand. The night had shifted, revealing that even in ordinary places, extraordinary secrets can exist, shaping events in ways that no one could have predicted. By the early hours of morning, the tension that had gripped the house for so long began to ease, though the sense of unease lingered like a shadow. The mother was taken into custody, her movements careful but resigned, and officers escorted her out of the house while her son watched from the living room, his small body tense and eyes wide with confusion. The boy clutched his stuffed animal as the police guided him to safety, trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had unfolded over the past hours. For him, the world had suddenly become larger and more complicated, filled with rules and threats that he could barely understand. Neighbors, who had watched the flashing lights and heard the commotion, whispered among themselves, unsure of what they had witnessed but knowing that something extraordinary had occurred. The quiet street, which had seemed so ordinary only hours earlier, now felt changed, as though it had absorbed a piece of the night's tension and would never quite be the same. Authorities continued their investigation, uncovering more details that deepened the story. Documents, photographs, and messages found inside the house painted a picture of a life shaped by fear and secrecy. The mother had been navigating threats and manipulations for years, creating a protective shield around her son and herself. Police officers began to piece together the web of hidden conflicts, realizing that the standoff was only the visible portion of a much larger and more complex situation. Each revelation added new layers of understanding, transforming what had initially seemed like simple resistance into a story of survival and human instinct. The boy, though shielded from most of the details, began to sense that his mother's actions, while extreme, had been rooted in a long history of vigilance and care. Family members and social workers became involved, ensuring the boy's safety and helping him process the night's events. For him, every step outside the house felt strange and uncertain. The familiar street now seemed unfamiliar, each neighbor a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. He had witnessed fear, defiance, and protection in ways that children rarely experience, and the memory of the night settled into his mind as something both frightening and formative. Though he could not yet articulate the depth of the events, the experience would shape his understanding of trust, danger, and the complexity of human behavior for years to come. As the sun rose, casting light on the wet pavement and reflecting off the scattered remnants of the night, the community began to digest what had happened. Conversations spread quickly, filled with speculation, concern, and curiosity. The story of the mother and her son became a cautionary tale, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that ordinary places can hide extraordinary struggles. The officers involved reflected on the events with a mix of relief and unease, aware that they had witnessed something beyond a routine intervention. They had seen fear, resilience, and a protective instinct that defied simple explanation. The boy returned to the home of relatives where he would begin to rebuild a sense of security and normalcy. Though the standoff was over, the lessons of that night lingered. The mother's defiance, the hidden threats, and the secret discoveries left an indelible mark on everyone involved. For the community, it was a story of caution, resilience, and the complexities that lie behind closed doors. For the boy, it was the first encounter with a world that was larger, more complicated, and more unpredictable than he had ever known. A night that would remain etched in his memory, shaping the way he would see safety, trust, and the lengths people go to protect those they love.